faint SOS moved across the endless galaxy, traveling through the darkness between stars. It was a cry filled with fear and desperation, sent by an alien civilization that was standing on the edge of total destruction. Their world was burning. Their people were dying. Their only hope was that someone somewhere would hear their message and come to help them. The words in the signal were simple. They asked for medicine, food, and allies to defend them from the threat that was crushing their existence. The signal reached many different advanced civilizations scattered across the galaxy. These civilizations were powerful, wise, and wealthy compared to the struggling aliens. They had the technology to help. They had the resources to save. But one by one they chose silence. Fear held them back. They did not want to risk their own safety by getting involved in another's war. Some believed it was not their responsibility. Others thought the small, weak civilization was already lost and not worth saving. And so the galaxy turned its face away, pretending not to hear the desperate cry. But the signal did not fade. It traveled further than the aliens ever expected. It reached a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow star. That planet was Earth. To the galaxy, Earth was still young and dangerous, a world of creatures known for their stubbornness, aggression, and endless survival instincts. Many alien species whispered about humans with fear and curiosity. They were seen as children of a death world, where storms, diseases, predators, and wars had shaped them into something hard, unpredictable, and unbreakable. And now it was these humans who heard the call. On Earth, when the SOS was decoded, it caused shockwaves. Across every nation, leaders, scientists, and ordinary people understood the meaning of those words. It was not just an alien cry for help, it was a test of what humanity would become now that they were no longer alone in the universe. Some asked, should Earth risk itself for strangers so far away? Should humans step into a war that did not belong to them? But others saw something different, a chance for unity, a chance to prove that humanity was more than its violent past. For centuries, humans had fought each other. Borders, religions, resources, and pride had divided them again and again. But now, for the first time in history, the enemy was not another nation or another ideology. It was the silence of the galaxy, the refusal of others to care. That silence was more terrifying than any war. And in that silence, Earth realized something powerful. If they turned away, they would become like the others, cowards watching from a safe distance while innocents were destroyed. Humanity could not accept that. World leaders began to meet. Governments that had once distrusted one another sat at the same table. Old rivalries seemed smaller when compared to the voice of a dying civilization, millions of light years away. The United States, China, Russia, Europe, Africa, South America, and countless other regions, each with their history of conflict, started to plan together. They shared intelligence. They shared technology. For the first time, human beings saw themselves not as separate nations, but as a single species standing before a choice that would define their future among the stars. The debates were long and fierce. Some leaders argued that Earth should only send supplies, medicine, doctors, and humanitarian aid. Others argued that such kindness would never be enough, that the aliens did not only need food or bandages, but also protection from the enemies that hunted them. If we go, one leader said, we cannot go empty-handed. We must go ready to fight. That idea was frightening, but it was also powerful. Slowly, more voices agreed. The alien SOS was not only about saving lives. It was about proving that Earth would not be silent, that humanity would stand against cruelty no matter where it was found. And so, a new decision was born. Earth would answer the call, but they would not answer it with whispers. They would answer it with unity, with strength, with a fleet. Factories that had once built machines for earthly wars were repurposed. Shipyards turned into places of cooperation. Engineers and scientists from rival nations began working side by side. Their skills combined to design ships capable of traveling across the stars. Soldiers trained not for conquest of each other, but for defense of those who had begged for help. Ordinary citizens donated, volunteered, and supported the mission, knowing that their world was changing forever. Yet beneath the excitement and determination there was fear. Humanity had never done this before. They were about to step into the wider galaxy not as explorers but as protectors, and maybe as warriors. Some feared they would be crushed. Others feared they would be misunderstood. But the feeling that carried through every discussion was stronger than fear. It was pride. Humanity, born from a world of storms, deserts, and endless struggles, was ready to prove that it was not just a species of destruction, but a species of choice. And the choice they made was to stand with the weak. As the plans grew, something incredible happened on Earth. People who had once thought of themselves as citizens of separate nations now began to call themselves something larger. They began to think of themselves as citizens of Earth. They argued less about borders and more about survival as one family. Humanity was finally living up to its oldest dream, to unite not in war against each other, but in the defense of life itself. The SOS had not only reached Earth, it had changed Earth. A desperate cry from across the stars had done what centuries of wars, politics, and diplomacy had failed to do. It had brought humanity together. For the first time, the people of Earth looked up at the night sky and did not see emptiness. They saw responsibility. They saw a test. And they were determined not to fail it. In the silence that followed the alien distress call, when all others had turned away, Earth prepared to answer. The rival nations of humanity had agreed for the first time to act as one. And in that unity, something new was born. The beginning of Earth's destiny among the stars. Factories across Earth began to thunder with life. Their smokestacks poured out steam. Their machines groaned and rattled, and their workers pushed themselves harder than ever before. Places that had once built cars, planes, or weapons for old wars between nations now had a new purpose. They were building for something bigger, something that would not serve one country but the entire human race. The hum of machines was no longer a sound of division. It was the heartbeat of unity. Humanity had chosen to answer the call from the stars, and now every bolt tightened, every plate of steel shaped, and every engine tested carried the weight of that decision. The shipyards, which once stood as proud symbols of competition between nations, also changed. For years, countries had raced to prove who could build the fastest, the strongest, or the most advanced ships for their own power. Now those same shipyards stood side by side, their banners no longer representing single flags but the blue and green planet itself. Rival engineers who had once hidden their secrets now shared their blueprints openly. Designs were merged. Ideas were traded. In every corner of the shipyards, men and women worked together, driven by the belief that their efforts were not just for Earth but for life beyond Earth. Soldiers, scientists, and engineers moved shoulder to shoulder. Soldiers who once trained to fight each other now trained to protect strangers they had never met. They studied new strategies, practiced in simulations, and adapted themselves to battles that might not look like anything they had ever known. Scientists spent sleepless nights in their laboratories, designing weapons, shields, and navigation systems capable of withstanding the emptiness of space. Engineers tested engines again and again, pushing machines to their limits to ensure that the fleet would not fail when it was needed most. There was no longer a clear line between soldier, scientist, or builder. They all worked as one team. Soldiers learned the language of engineers. Engineers listened to scientists, and scientists respected the discipline of soldiers. Each of them understood that if one part failed, the whole dream would collapse. Together, they created a war fleet unlike anything Earth had ever built before. The aliens who had sent the distress signal had asked for medicine, food, and doctors. Their plea was for aid and kindness, and humanity did prepare some of that. Supplies were gathered, doctors volunteered, and medicines were manufactured in huge quantities. But as humanity studied the situation more carefully, they realized that help would not be enough if the threat destroying the alien world still remained. What good were doctors if the hospitals were bombed? What good was medicine if the people were slaughtered before they could use it? And so Earth chose to prepare something more than simple aid. They built a fleet not only to defend but to fight back. Ships were armed with weapons powerful enough to shatter enemy lines. Defensive shields were designed to protect both the human vessels and the civilians they came to rescue. Every ship was built to serve two purposes: protection and retaliation. If an enemy dared to attack, humanity would strike back with force, not out of cruelty, but out of determination that the innocent would not fall again. At first, some questioned this choice. Why not only bring aid? Why carry so many weapons? The answer was clear to those who had lived on Earth. Humanity's history was filled with struggles. Wars, invasions, oppression, and survival had taught humans one painful lesson. Kindness without strength often failed. To protect the weak, you needed more than open hands. You needed strong shields and the will to stand against those who would harm them. The fleet grew day by day. Small ships were built for fast travel and scouting. Massive carriers took shape, designed to carry supplies, weapons, and even mobile hospitals. Warships stood ready, their hulls gleaming with fresh steel, engines roaring as they were tested in the skies above Earth. Inside, crews trained not only for combat, but also for rescue operations. They drilled for every possibility: evacuations, medical emergencies, battles in space, and land assaults. Every member of the fleet knew their role, and every role was vital. The project united more than just nations. It united humanity's spirit. Ordinary people felt pride in every news report of the fleet's progress. Children drew pictures of starships and taped them on their walls. Families donated what they could, sending letters of encouragement to the men and women building the vessels. Farmers sent extra food to feed the workers in the factories. Pilots volunteered to test dangerous new crafts. It was no longer just a military operation. It was a movement that touched every corner of Earth. Yet outside Earth, the galaxy watched with caution. To many alien civilizations, the sight of Earth's war fleet rising so quickly looked like a threat. They whispered to one another. Was humanity truly answering a cry for help? Or were they using the SOS as an excuse to unleash their violent nature? The galaxy had long called humans Deathworlders, beings too fierce, too wild, too unpredictable. And now, seeing their massive fleet of warships, that reputation only grew stronger. To them, this was not aid. It was aggression. It was the awakening of a dangerous new power. But to humanity, the story was different. They did not see aggression. They saw responsibility. They did not see weapons of conquest. They saw tools of protection. The fleet was not built to conquer worlds, but to save them. Each missile was meant to stop invaders. Each shield was meant to guard civilians. Each ship was a promise. Earth would not sit idle while others suffered. In the long nights when workers paused to rest and soldiers leaned against cold steel walls, they thought about the mission ahead. Some imagined the faces of the aliens they would save, beings with eyes, voices, and fears just like theirs. Others thought about the enemies, faceless and merciless, who had caused such destruction. Most of all, they thought about what it meant to be human. For the first time in history, humanity was not preparing for a war against itself, but for a war to defend others. That thought gave them strength. The fleet became a symbol greater than its steel and firepower. It became proof that humanity had changed. The same species that once fought over land, power, and pride now stood together to protect strangers across the stars. Every rivet hammered, every circuit tested, every soldier trained carried this meaning. The galaxy saw aggression. Humanity saw protection. And as the war fleet neared completion, the people of Earth felt something they had rarely felt before. Unity with purpose. They were not only building ships, they were building their future. A future where Earth was no longer silent, no longer divided, no longer hidden. When the last ships rolled out of the shipyards and the engines roared into life, the fleet did not just stand as a collection of machines. It stood as a declaration that Earth had heard the call and Earth had answered. And when humanity answered, it did so with all its strength, all its will, and all its heart. The great fleet of Earth, forged in unity and determination, crossed the emptiness of space. Engines thundered in silence, carrying warships across the endless void between stars. Inside, crews held their breath, waiting for the moment they would arrive. They had trained for this, prepared for this, dreamed and feared this. Yet no one truly knew what they would find. The alien distress call had described danger and suffering, but words alone could never prepare them for the reality that awaited on the other side. When the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, the sight before them made every heart on board grow heavy. The alien world was not just in danger, it was on the edge of death. Entire cities were nothing but ashes. Great towers had collapsed into broken skeletons of metal and stone. Fires still burned, their smoke rising high into the planet's atmosphere. Roads were littered with ruins, and entire neighborhoods were erased as if they had never existed. From orbit, humanity could see scars across the planet's surface, as though it had been clawed by some giant hand of war. Refugee ships fled the world in desperate clusters, their engines weak, their hulls cracked and battered. Families crowded inside, praying they would escape the slaughter below. Some of these ships exploded in silence as enemy fire cut them apart. Others drifted powerless, unable to move, their crews and passengers trapped and waiting to die. Humanity watched this with horror. their hands tightening on the controls of their weapons. They had heard the SOS, but seeing the suffering in front of their eyes filled them with both grief and fury. Orbiting above the planet was the cause of all this destruction, an enemy armada. The alien attackers surrounded the world like vultures circling a dying prey. Their warships gleamed with deadly light, their cannons firing mercilessly at the planet and its fleeing civilians. They had grown confident, certain that no one would challenge their grip. After all, the galaxy had turned away. Who would risk themselves for this small, broken civilization? The answer came in fire. Humanity wasted no time. Earth's fleet spread into formation, moving with precision and speed. Massive carriers released swarms of smaller fighters, their engines flaring as they shot forward like arrows. Warships locked their weapons onto the enemy, targeting engines, weapons, and shields. And then, in a single terrible moment, the silence of space was shattered. Earth unleashed its fury. Beams of energy and storms of missiles tore into the enemy armada. Human weapons struck with brutal accuracy, each shot calculated, each strike meant to cripple and destroy. Enemy ships burst apart in flames, their twisted wreckage spinning into the void. The attackers, so sure of their victory, suddenly found themselves under fire from a force they had never expected. The humans did not fight cautiously. They fought with the rage of a species born on a harsh world, a species that had survived endless wars, disasters, and predators. Every blast carried the weight of Earth's history, and that history was written in resilience. To the alien victims on the surface, the sight of Earth's fleet was like the arrival of gods. Refugees who thought they were doomed looked up at the sky and saw human warships driving back their oppressors. Hope long dead returned in their hearts. Some fell to their knees in prayer, others cried out in joy, and many simply wept in relief. The humans had come, against all odds, against the silence of the rest of the galaxy. Someone had answered their call. To them, the human fleet was salvation, the bright light cutting through the darkness of despair. But to the enemy, it was something far different. Terror spread through their ranks as their ships exploded one after another. Their commanders barked orders, but their fleets faltered under the relentless human assault. The humans did not fight like other species they had faced. They did not retreat when pressed. They did not hesitate when confronted. They attacked with a fearless intensity that the enemy had never seen before. The galaxy called humans Deathworlders, creatures hardened by the most dangerous planet imaginable. And now that reputation was no longer just a whisper. It was a living nightmare unfolding in battle. Enemy pilots reported human fighters chasing them with unmatched persistence, never letting them escape. Enemy captains watched in disbelief as human warships shrugged off damage and pushed forward, refusing to break formation. Even when human vessels were struck, their crews fought on, patching systems, firing weapons, and sacrificing themselves so the rest of the fleet could continue the fight. Humanity did not fight for conquest. They fought to protect, and that made them terrifying. The battle raged above the alien world. Explosions lit up the darkness like suns being born and dying in moments. The screams of dying ships echoed over communication channels. Refugee ships, once hunted, now found safe paths to escape as humans formed protective walls around them. Carriers deployed medical teams and escorts to guide the weak and wounded to safety. But even in the chaos, the humans never stopped attacking. Their mission was clear: break the enemy no matter the cost. The longer the fight lasted, the more the enemy realized they had made a mistake. They had believed the galaxy would look away, and mostly it had. But they had not counted on Earth. They had not counted on a species that had been underestimated for centuries. The humans came not with words of negotiation, not with offers of compromise, but with fire and steel. To the enemy, they were not saviors. They were monsters, relentless, unyielding, and deadly. On the surface of the planet, the aliens who had sent the SOS could only watch in awe. The sky burned with streaks of light as warships clashed above. Their homes were in ruins, their cities destroyed, but now they saw something they had not seen before: defenders. For every building that fell, a human warship answered with fire against the invaders. For every life lost, humanity's fury grew stronger. The aliens whispered to one another, some too afraid to believe it was real. Could these fierce beings truly have come for them? When the first human warship descended lower into the planet's atmosphere, its engines roaring like thunder, crowds of survivors gathered to watch. For them, it was as if a miracle had arrived. For their enemies, it was a death sentence. The humans had entered the war, and nothing would be the same again. In that moment, the galaxy was forced to remember the truth about Earth. This was a world that had bred warriors by necessity, a species that had learned survival through endless hardship. The humans did not see themselves as conquerors. They saw themselves as protectors. But to anyone standing against them, they were terror itself. The enemy armada, once confident, now trembled. The alien refugees, once hopeless, now believed again, and the humans, standing between the two, became exactly what the galaxy had feared and what the desperate had prayed for. The Death Worlders, the children of Earth, the fleet that answered when no one else would. Victory came, but it did not come easily. The battle that raged across the alien skies tore through both fleets with terrible power. Human ships, brave and determined, did not escape the price of war. Some were ripped apart by enemy fire, their hulls shattering into burning fragments that drifted in silence across the void. Entire crews vanished, lost forever in the darkness of space. Families back on Earth would never hear their voices again, their sacrifice carried only in the wreckage left behind. Inside the surviving ships, the cost was felt deeply. Medics rushed through smoke-filled corridors, tending to wounded soldiers with trembling hands. Fires burned in engine rooms. Some ships limped through the fight with half their systems destroyed, held together only by the stubborn will of their crews. Yet even in the face of such destruction, humanity pushed forward. Each loss only hardened their resolve. Each ship destroyed only made the rest fight fiercer, as if to honor the dead by refusing to yield. The enemy, once confident and merciless, began to crumble. They had not expected such determination, such raw fury from the humans. Their formations broke apart as Earth's fleet pressed harder and harder, hammering them with relentless firepower. Ship after ship fell to human guns until the invaders finally began to retreat. Their once proud armada, which had surrounded the alien world like a cage, now scattered in fear. For the first time in this war, the enemy was not the hunter. They were the hunted. On the planet below, survivors who had hidden in ruins or fled in small refugee ships looked up at the sky with disbelief. The enemy who had seemed unstoppable was leaving. The thunder of guns faded, replaced by a silence filled with hope. Alien families clung to one another, their tears falling freely as they realized they had lived to see another dawn. To them, the humans were not just warriors, they were saviors. They had come when no one else did, and they had driven back the nightmare that had nearly destroyed their world. But even in victory, questions began to rise as human soldiers stepped onto the alien soil, carrying supplies and offering aid. Whispers spread among the survivors. They were grateful, how could they not be? Yet alongside their gratitude came unease. Some remembered the sound of human weapons more clearly than the sight of medicine or food. The thunder of human guns echoed louder in their memories than the gentle touch of doctors. For those who had been saved, the difference between rescue and domination blurred. Did they come only to help? Some asked quietly. Or did they come to show their power? The question lingered, growing heavier with every passing day. The alien people were alive, but they also saw the fearsome side of humanity, the side that struck without hesitation, the side that fought like predators defending their home. To them, humans were saviors, yes, but also a warning. Gratitude and fear mixed together, leaving a complicated legacy. For humanity, the victory was both triumph and tragedy. News spread back to Earth of the losses. The names of the dead were read in solemn ceremonies. Families wept, knowing their loved ones had given their lives for strangers in a faraway world. Yet, alongside the grief, there was pride. Humanity had proven that it would not stand idle while innocents were slaughtered. The price had been high, but the message was clear. Earth had entered the galaxy, and it had entered with strength. Other civilizations watched closely. For ages, Earth had been seen as a backwater planet, a dangerous place of wild creatures and violent people. Many had dismissed it, believing humans would never rise to anything greater than tribal conflicts and short-lived empires. But the battle changed everything. The fleet humanity had built was not a rumor anymore. It was real, and it had stood against an enemy armada, and won. Now the galaxy began to see Earth differently, not as an unimportant world on the edge of the stars, but as a rising power, a power that others would need to respect and perhaps fear. The same whispers that spread among the rescued aliens now spread across distant star systems. Stories of the battle traveled quickly. Tales of human ships cutting through enemies, of their refusal to retreat, of their willingness to sacrifice entire crews. all became legends retold in markets, councils, and military briefings. To the weak and oppressed, these stories were a beacon of hope. They believed that if Earth could rise to defend one world, perhaps it would defend others too. To them, humans were saviors, protectors who would not abandon the helpless. But to the powerful empires, the ones who had ignored the distress call, these same stories were frightening. They wondered what would happen if humanity ever turned its strength against them. Could they withstand such fury? Could they survive the arrival of the Deathworlders' fleet? The rescued aliens struggled with their emotions. Gratitude filled their hearts when they looked at their children, alive because of humanity. Yet fear crept into their minds when they remembered the firepower that had lit their skies. They bowed in thanks to human captains, but later, in whispers, they questioned what the future would bring. Was humanity truly a friend, or would they someday demand something in return? The humans themselves did not see the same picture. To them, the mission had always been about protection. They mourned their dead, comforted the wounded, and offered aid where they could. They brought food, built shelters, and gave medicine freely. They believed they had done what was right, but they did not fully understand how terrifying their strength appeared to others. In the days after the battle, alien children clung to human medics, smiling through tears. Families named their newborns after human soldiers. Survivors lit candles in honor of the Earth crews who had fallen in their defense. Yet still the whispers did not fade, because for every candle, there was also a memory of the skies filled with explosions, of the Earth shaking from human bombardments. Some believed that humanity had saved them not just out of kindness, but also to prove themselves to the galaxy. And in a way, it was true. Humanity had proven something. They had shown that they were not weak, not small, not silent. They had shown that they could fight and win against threats that others had avoided. The galaxy now had to reckon with a new reality. Earth was no longer just a young world. It was a power that had arrived on the galactic stage, carrying both mercy and might. Victory had come, but it had come at a cost of lives, of ships, and of innocence. Humanity had saved a world, but it had also changed how the galaxy saw them forever. No one would forget the thunder of human guns, the brilliance of their warships, or the relentless force of their will. For the first time, Earth was not dismissed, not ignored, not mocked as a primitive world. For the first time, Earth was feared. When the battle was finally over and the enemy had fled into the darkness, silence returned to the alien skies. Fires still burned in broken cities. Smoke still rose into the air, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the ruins, but the world was alive. It had been saved from complete destruction. Humanity's warfleet, battered but victorious, stood above the planet like a wall of steel, protecting what was left. For the first time in weeks, the survivors could breathe without fear of being hunted. They had a future again, though it was scarred and fragile. The humans did not leave immediately. They knew that victory in battle was only the first step. War had left the alien people with shattered homes, broken families, and ruined lands. The fleets that once oppressed them had destroyed farms, poisoned waters, and reduced hospitals to rubble. Humanity stepped in not as conquerors but as builders. They deployed doctors who treated wounds, engineers who rebuilt power grids, and soldiers who helped clear dangerous ruins. Medicines were unloaded in vast supplies, carried into refugee camps where sickness and starvation had begun to spread. Technology that Earth had once guarded carefully was now given freely. Water filters, medical scanners, portable shelters, and even food machines that could feed thousands at once. The aliens watched with mixed emotions. Gratitude filled their hearts as they saw human medics kneeling beside their children, offering gentle care. They felt hope as engineers raised temporary shelters and purified their poisoned rivers. But beneath the gratitude, there was also a deep, unshakable memory of what had just happened. The humans had not come with empty hands, they had come with warships. They had saved lives, yes, but they had saved them through fire and fury, by unleashing destruction greater than the enemy itself. The aliens could not forget the sight of the sky filled with explosions, the thunder of guns, and the unstoppable might of the Earth fleet. As the humans worked, survivors told stories among themselves. Around campfires in the shadows of broken cities, they spoke of the day the Deathworlders came. To some, the humans were angels of salvation, warriors who had stood between them and extinction when no one else had dared. To others, they were figures of awe and fear, beings too powerful, too dangerous, who brought victory but left a lingering chill in their hearts. Children would grow up hearing both kinds of stories, tales of saviors and tales of monsters. The human commanders understood this. They knew that their presence was both comfort and intimidation. That was why, when the immediate rebuilding was stable, the decision was made for the fleet to depart. Humanity would leave behind supplies, advisors, and technology, but they would not stay to rule. They wanted to prove that their mission had not been conquest but protection. The moment the last hospitals were standing, the power grids working, and the food stores filled, preparations began for departure. The day the human fleet left became an event etched in memory. Crowds gathered in the ruins watching as the massive ships rose into the skies. Some wept openly, shouting thanks in voices the humans could not understand but could feel in their hearts. Others stood silently, their eyes wide, unsure if they were witnessing heroes leaving or titans retreating. As the engines of the great vessels roared and the fleet vanished into the stars, the planet was left in silence once again. But this time it was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of a people changed forever. What humanity left behind was more than medicine or machines. They left behind a memory, a story that began to travel faster than any ship. Across the galaxy, whispers grew into tales, and tales grew into legends. The message was simple. When an alien world cried for help, the galaxy turned its back except for Earth. And Earth did not come with soft words. Earth came with warships. The meaning of that story depended on who heard it. For the weak, for the oppressed, and for the forgotten, it was a story of hope. It meant that even if the mighty empires ignored their cries, there was at least one world that would answer. To them, Earth became a symbol of protection, the shield against the darkness. Mothers in distant colonies told their children, "Do not be afraid. If the worst comes, the humans will come too." But for the powerful, the story was far less comforting. Empires that had ignored the distress call now wondered if they had made a mistake. They had avoided the fight to protect their own strength, but in doing so, they had allowed Earth to rise. Now humanity had proven itself not only willing, but capable of changing the course of wars. If they could save one planet, could they also challenge others? The thought spread unease. Councils debated late into the night. Military commanders studied reports of human ships, and rulers asked themselves the same question. Were the humans truly protectors, or were they a new threat? Galactic history began to shift in that moment. Alliances whispered of inviting Earth into their ranks, hoping to bind this new power before it grew too strong. Others whispered of preparing defenses, fearing that one day Earth might turn its weapons elsewhere. The humans, for their part, returned home quietly, proud of their unity and sacrifice, not yet realizing how their actions had rewritten their place in the galaxy. On Earth, news of the victory spread like wildfire. Cities erupted with pride and grief. Families mourned the ones who had not returned. But they also held their heads high, knowing that their loved ones had died for something greater than borders or politics. They had died for life itself, for strangers across the stars. Humanity felt different after that day. No longer did they see themselves as small, isolated, or unimportant. They had proven that they could reach beyond their world and change the fate of another. Back on the saved planet, survivors began carving monuments to remember the day. Some built statues of human ships, others etched the names of fallen soldiers, both alien and human, into stone. In classrooms, children were taught of the day the humans came. Some teachers told the story with joy, calling it the day of salvation. Others spoke it with warning, reminding their students that while the humans had saved them, they had also shown the galaxy just how powerful they truly were. The memory of that day spread further than any monument could reach. Traders carried the tale to distant systems. Refugees told it in whispers on faraway colonies. Soldiers repeated it in their barracks, half with admiration and half with fear. Everywhere the story traveled, it carried two faces, one of heroes, one of monsters. And so the galaxy was divided. To some, Earth became a light in the darkness, the guardians of the helpless. To others, Earth became a storm, a power to be watched carefully, a warning of what Deathworlders could do when provoked. But one truth remained the same for all. No one could forget. No one could ignore the day Earth's war fleet answered the SOS. It had begun as a desperate cry from a dying world, but it ended as the moment humanity stepped onto the galactic stage. From that day forward, Earth was no longer a forgotten backwater planet. It was a name that carried weight, a name that inspired both hope and fear. And in the vast silence of space, where cries for help often went unanswered, one story lived on forever. The day the humans came with warships, and the balance of power among the stars was changed for all time.